This recording is an interview of Mr. John Hendrickson of 21 Highland Road, Valley Stream, on April 18, 1988, at his home. The interviewer is Adele Hagmann of the Valley Stream Historical Society. All right, Mr. Hendrickson, there's quite a few Hendricksons in Valley Stream. They're not all the same family, are they?
No, they're not.
I thought maybe we would clear that up a little bit by talking about your parents' generation, who they were and who their close relatives were.
Well, my father was one of three brothers. Arthur, Frank were the other two. My father's name was Freeman. His father was John C Hendrickson, who lived in a home over here on Central Avenue for a good many years. He also was, he and his wife, Lillian, were the superintendent of what we used to call it the poorhouse up on, in Roosevelt.
What?
Over in, let me think of the name, just east of Uniondale Avenue on Jerusalem Road, for the town of Hempstead. And,
was that a county poorhouse?
no, it was a town.
Town?
Town
of Hempstead.
Town of Hempstead.
And it was for indigent old people?
That's right.
And they acted as
They were superintendents. Yes.
They didn't live there, though, huh?
Yes, they did.
Oh, they did live there
Yes.
for a while.
Yes, for about 10 years, I believe.
Right. And their house on Central Avenue, was that south of Merrick Road?
Oh, no, that's right there by our office, 63 North
Oh.
Central Avenue. But
Right.
it's no longer there.
Oh, I see.
It's been demolished.
Uh-huh. All right. And you had cousins in town, too, then?
Well, yes, both Arthur, he had 5 children, and Frank Sr. had 2 children, a daughter and a son.
And you had how many brothers?
I had one sister,
One
Lillian,
sister.
who married Ralph Fisher.
Yes, I know Lillian.
So that's right.
Uh-huh. Were your parents born in Valley Stream?
Well, my father was. My mother was born in County Kerry, Ireland. So that's a bit of history.
Yes, she came over here to Valley Stream. Hmm?
Well, yes, she came.
How did she wind up here?
Well, that's a good question. She came, I think, about sometime prior to the war, World War I. My father and mother were married in 1919, and she was working for my grandmother and grandfather up in Hempstead, and apparently my father took kindly to her, and she took kindly to my father, and they were married.
That's a very nice story. All right, now where did they live when they were first married?
Well, when they were first married, they lived over on Benedict Avenue, 45 Benedict Avenue. They moved it used to be a little, they called it Sinner's Hope. It was up where School 13 now resides. And they moved it over to Benedict Avenue, and they added on to it. And that's where I was born.
So they bought the chapel, in other words.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And what was your father doing at that time?
Well, he was in the Navy. He was in and out, not in and out, but he was in the Navy until he was discharged. I think it was in 1920 or 21. And then he went to work down on Wall Street. I'm not exactly sure what his duties were. He never really confided in me, but he was probably a runner or some such thing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally in 22, he and his 2 brothers took over my grandfather's, I guess you would call it, business, and incorporated it into Hendrickson Brothers.
Now, what kind of business was that your grandfather ran?
Well, digging cellars with horses and scoops in the old-fashioned way. Back in the 20s, they didn't have any modern tractors or this or that.
But it must have been a fairly big business if the whole 3 brothers went into it.
Well, that's when it started to expand. My grandfather didn't have a very large business, but the fellas, I guess, thought, well, this would be a good way to get going.
Mm-hmm.
They did.
They certainly did. They built a big business.
So.
And those 3 brothers were Frank?
Arthur, Frank and Freeman.
All right. How long did you live in this
Well,
chapel?
well, I really don't know. It seems to me it was maybe, I was born in 22, and I think probably it wasn't more than 2 or 3 years, because we then moved to the corner of 144 North Cottage Street, which was on the corner of southwest corner of Argyle and Cottage. And that's where we lived until 39, when my father built a house on the corner of St. Mark's and Rockaway Avenue.
Those two houses are still standing, aren't they?
Oh,
in
yes,
that area?
yes,
Mhm.
yes.
And so you lived there for the rest of your childhood and adolescence?
Well, until 1939, and then,
Oh,
no,
Yeah.
wait a minute, no, I'm getting confused again. We moved into it in 1939, and during the war, my mother and father sold it, and they built another home. No, they lived in it until after the war. I went to college and spent my summers with them. And I guess it was in 47 or 48, they built another house on St. Mark's Place to the east between Cornwall Avenue and Emerson Place, and they lived there until they passed away in the 70s, early 70s.
Now, where did you go to school?
Wheeler Avenue 13 and Central High School.
Central, was that the new building at that time?
Yeah.
That was fairly new, though, wasn't it?
Well, it opened in 29. I got out in 39, so I was...
5 or 6 years old. And when you had your home over on in that area, you had to walk to Central and walk to Wheeler. They didn't have any bus service in those days.
No, I don't.
Do you remember any of your neighbors over there?
Well, when we were living on, when we were living on Cottage in Argyle, the Fisher family lived just to the north of us, right on the other corner. And to my west, on Argyle Street, was the Mitchell family, who had a son, John. And he and I used to be quite buddy and pally. And the Fisher boys lived across the street. That was Ralph and Chester and Gregory. I knew them all quite well as their sisters. And we always had a good time. We used to play pool down in the Fisher cellar.
How about the school? Do you remember any of the teachers there?
I remember my kindergarten teacher's name, Mrs. Terry. And I remember Mrs. Atwater. I think she was my second grade teacher. I think my 4th or 5th grade teacher was Mrs. Joy, or Joyce, I can't remember which it was. And Mrs. Adams, who was a math teacher, or arithmetic teacher, I guess.
You're doing very well. How about the principal?
Well, let me think. Mr. Smith, I believe, was the principal when I first started, and then Mr. Mummet.
Oh, yes.
Ira Mummet.
He's been around,
Oh,
was
yes.
around up until
Yeah.
recently. So what about the typical day in your childhood? Did your father get up very early in the morning?
Yes. He
And for
was
that
always out.
business he had to be, huh?
He was always out much before I.
Well, the three brothers sort of divvied up the work. Is
Oh,
that
yes.
what did they specialize in?
Well,
anything?
I guess you could say Arthur was primarily the instigator or the salesman who went out and got the work, and he also contributed to its ongoing. And Pop and Frank, well, between the horses and the equipment, we had to keep things in shape.
Did they have their own horses? Did they
oh
rent
yes,
them?
No, they had their own
So
horses. They had stables.
and
Oh yes,
everything,
yes.
and they
yes.
had to give them the care. All right. Now about yours, did you have to get up with your father?
No. Fortunately,
Yeah.
I did in later days, not because of that, but I guess I got in the habit when I was young of getting up early, and I still do to this day.
Yeah, that's something that sticks with you. And all right, then you went to school first, I suppose, was the first thing you did during the day.
Oh yes, yeah. No.
And you had
school.
what, a 9 to 3?
Well, I don't remember the exact hours, but I would presume in grammar school, yes, it was. When I started high school, or junior high, I guess, the ninth grade, we went through 7th and 8th and ninth over Central. I think that was one of the first years that they had the double session.
Oh.
And I was fortunate enough I got to go to school in the morning through all the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. I didn't have any afternoon classes at all.
Oh, that was nice.
So,
So what time would you be due at school? Do you remember?
Oh, I think it was 8 o'clock when I
and
got
you
out.
went from 8 to 4,
No,
to 12?
I think it was 12 or 12:15 maybe, somewhere in that area.
Mm-hmm. So that left the afternoon
Well,
free.
I had the whole afternoon.
So what
and
did you do with
evening.
that?
Well, play.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me I always did my homework at night. I don't remember ever getting it done before.
Well, that's more sensible. Where did you play?
Oh, just in the neighborhood.
In the neighborhood, not in the park or Fine's Field? Or...
Well, occasionally during the winter we might go up to where the old golf course was, just north of now the Southern State Parkway. They had a lake up there, and we used to skate on the lake, and also over here.
Now, where was that?
Just north of Southern State Parkway and east of Franklin Avenue.
And they had a lake there?
Well, a little
small
lake,
pond.
a small pond. It was just
For ice skating?
for ice skating in the winter.
And there was a golf course?
Oh yes, and full 18-hole golf course.
Is that right?
Mhm.
That ran all along Southern State?
Yeah,
And
not too far north. It was a rectangular shaped piece of property. At that time, I was not really interested.
you were not a golfer?
Well, we played up there. My sister had some clubs, and we played a little bit.
Uh-huh. You never did caddying?
No, I never did.
All right. Do you? How about like weekends, Sundays? Can you remember anything special about doing what you did on Sundays, Saturdays,
no.
Sundays?
Not really.
Did you hold a job at any time during the high school?
Oh yes, yes. During the summers, I worked for my father or for Hendrickson Brothers as an assistant to the field engineer who did all the layout work on the job.
That was nice, good training, huh?
Yes, it was. It was excellent. I used to be able to run a transit and level, and do all the necessary work.
And how about church? Were you involved in church?
No, I went to Sunday school with my parents. Well, not with my parents, but because of my parents. And they were never great churchgoers. Consequently, I guess you could say I never was either, and still am not. However, I believe my sister and my wife both attend.
That was Grace Methodist?
Grace, yes.
And how about holidays? Do you remember any? Did you have family outings, or what did you do, or didn't
No.
you have holidays?
Well, I guess there must have been, but I really don't recall any particular or specials or July 4th. Pop used to have some fireworks, and we'd shoot them off in the street. And, it was legal then, I guess.
Oh, yeah, that's right, it was. How about vacations?
Well, let me see. The Fisher family had a lodge up in Corinth, New York, and I spent, I guess, 3 or 4 summers up there with them, and we had a wonderful time up there. They had a tennis court, and I was involved in tennis, and we had a great time. And it was right in the woods, you might say, and we could do anything and everything we wanted to do.
Yeah, this was before you had your job.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when you were younger.
Yes, when I was, I don't know, 10, 12.
Yeah. And you were interested in tennis. Where did you play around here?
I played with school.
Uh-huh.
And
They had the tennis courts over there then?
oh, yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they were back. I haven't been behind Central in so long. I guess it would be behind the auditorium or just a little bit north of where the auditorium is.
Yeah, well, they still have tennis courts there for the park, so I guess it's the same spot,
Probably.
the same place. Do you remember anything unusual happening in town when you were growing up about, about banks or churches or politicians?
Well, when I was growing up, I didn't have much interest
In
those things.
They didn't affect your family?
No, not that I recall.
Now, your father and his brothers were becoming more well-known all the time, though, weren't they? I mean, they were
Yes.
expanding their field. I've seen their equipment upstate New York, I know.
Yes. Well, I guess Arthur was mayor of Valley Stream for a while. Remember the exact year? I think it was in 28 or maybe 30 or 32.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't recall exactly when, but I know he was mayor.
Well, they have been involved in quite a few things
Mhm.
in church. Now, he was involved in something with Grace Methodist Church, wasn't he? Did he?
Oh yeah, well the whole family was.
Yes. Well, that's what I mean.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah. What role did they play there?
Well, they were.
Were they
I-
involved in the construction?
Yes, I think we built the educational building.
Mm-hmm.
That was, oh Lord, good many years ago. And I remember I believe his name was Rapp,
Mm-hmm.
who was the fundraiser, paid fundraiser for the
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
and that was when Pastor Paul Sartorio was first. I won't say first; it wasn't his first year. It was very close to his first or second year in his ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Here, that took place.
Uh-huh. Okay. Now, do you remember any of the other mayors or that your family might have been involved with?
No, not really.
No.
I'm non-political.
Waldinger was in for
Oh,
quite
yeah.
a few
Oh,
years,
yes,
you know.
yes.
And that,
Well, the name is familiar, but I don't know as I ever known.
uh-huh. Now, we spoke about your friends. Did you ever go on trips together? I mean, go down to the beaches or anything like that? Or did you find all your fun here in Valley Stream?
No, I suppose occasionally we might go down to Point Lookout, but not. It wasn't a regular
Uh-huh.
summertime adventure.
All right. Now, did you or your parents belong to any organizations at all in Valley Stream?
No, well, my mother didn't. I don't believe that I can recall. Father was a Mason and a Rotary. Other than that, I don't know if he belonged to any.
Mm-hmm. Did they go out of the village for any particular activities?
No, I don't believe they had any
No.
special trips or this or
No.
whatever you might.
Now, you say, of course, you're not political. Wasn't Hendrickson brothers, any of them involved in politics at all?
Well, as I said, my uncle Arthur, he was.
Oh, he was the politician,
He
huh?
was the politico, I guess you
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah, sure. Uh-huh. So, he didn't, was he anything in the Republican Party or anything like that? Was it the Republican Party?
Yes, it was a
Yeah, I
Republican
figured
Party,
that.
but I don't. Other than
He never
being,
took any kind of a position?
he might have been a leader or a village leader or whatever, and probably he was.
Uh-huh.
Being the mayor, I would imagine he was have dual
Right.
offices.
What, do you remember anybody in particular who was influential in your life, who made a difference? Now, you spoke about learning through this man in the firm.
John King, yes, he was a very influential man. He taught me a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'm sorry to say, I never had it I never applied it to such a degree, but at least I had it while I was in college learning the same subjects, and it was very beneficial.
Now, where did you go to college?
Well, I started in Lafayette in eastern Pennsylvania, and I went there for 2.5 years and decided that they couldn't teach me anymore. So I left school in, let's see, it was November of 47.
Walked out, huh?
And naturally, December 7th came along, and we were at war. So I asked my father if he had a job for me, and he said no.
Oh.
Well, I could see his point. He'd been paying for my education, and I just more or less said, well, that was it. So I went into the city and I got a job from Sperry Gyroscope Corporation on Manhattan Bridge Plaza, testing automatic pilots. And that went along for, I guess, a year and a half, 2 years.
What kind of job was it? Was it more or less routine?
Oh yeah, it was a mechanical job.
Thing.
You put
Yeah.
the automatic pilots themselves on a test machine, and you had to run them for 4 or 5 different tests on different machines.
I see.
It was just a matter of were they within tolerance.
Well, was that before they were located out here on the island?
Oh yes, yeah. Matter of fact, I was part of the moving van from Manhattan Bridge Plaza to Lake Success.
Oh, I see.
So it was ironical. The Hendrickson Brothers company did a great deal of the work at the new plant. So I was talking to truck drivers at lunchtime, and I knew I'd known all my life almost. Yeah. But that was about the extent of that. And then after a while, I was putting in so many hours over there. I was working, I guess you might say, 80 hours a week.
Oh, no.
And I was getting 63.5 cents an hour for it. So it was a big deal. So my father says, hey, look, you can't live like this anymore. He says, you better come to work for the company. Which I did, but I told him, I said, you know, the minute I come, I'm not going to have a defense deferment anymore, and I'm going to go. And he said, well...
Now we're talking about World War II time.
Yeah. So I went to work for the company, and for a while they were expanding Curtis Airport down here where Green Acres Shopping Center is now, and I was working on the extension of the runways and this and that. And finally it came that we didn't have any more defense work, and so John went out and went down to New York and enlisted in the Navy. I wasn't going to get drafted.
Get it over
put in
with.
the Army.
Oh, I see. You're a Navy man.
Yeah. Well, my father was in the Navy. So, and then I went up, had my boot camp up at Sampson. And after that finished...
well, what year was this now?
This would be 43.
43.
Yeah. And so I was up there for a while. I was in the OGU unit, which is outgoing unit. And I was talking to a, what do they call him? Not a bookkeeper, yeoman, who does all the typing and this and that and everything else. And he said, hey, I was looking at your record, and he says, you have 2.5 years of college. He says, you should apply for the V12 program. And I says, fine, what's that? Let's do it. So I did, and I was accepted, and they sent me to Cornell to finish my engineering education.
Is that what the V12
Yeah.
was?
So I got graduated from Cornell in October '45, and the war was over and everything, so I was very fortunate.
Well, that was very good timing.
Yeah, well, I spent a couple of months out in the Pacific, but nobody was shooting at us then, so it was relatively a pleasurable
A good
trip.
experience, huh?
Yes.
All right, then you came home. Now, where did you get married? In this?
Well, I met my wife Emily up at Cornell, and we were married. Let's see, there was quite a spate of activity in October and November of '45. I graduated from college, got my commission as an ensign, and then got married on November 3rd, '45. Well, it all happened within the space of a month.
You got it all over with at once. And then, well, she was not a local girl then.
No, she came from a little town on Route 17, about 30 miles southeast of Binghamton, called Deposit. And she was at Cornell. We met there and picked up and
That was it.
got on our way.
And then what happened after November 3rd?
Well, I went out to the Pacific, I think, on December, beginning of December, on the 15th or whatever. And I got a letter, I believe, in February or March, saying he was going to be a mother, I was going to be a father, which happened. And that was Sally's birth on September of '46. So
And then you came back to, where was she at this time? Was did
She
go?
was, no, she stayed with my folks here in Valley Stream.
And then, so you came back to Valley Stream.
Mm-hmm. And we had a little apartment for the rest of that summer. I got home, I think it was, excuse me, in July, and until the end of August, I guess, we had a high school was Lillian knew. I had an apartment down there, and Emily subleased the apartment for the rest of the summer, and we stayed down there for a few months, for a month and a half, I guess. And then we went back with my mother and father, as the teacher needed her apartment again. And school started.
Did you, and then how long did you stay with your parents?
I think it was maybe a year and a half, and then we built this place. And we've been here ever since.
And Hendrickson lives next door, don't they?
That was my uncle's Arthur's.
Office
And
place?
it's his wife's Violet, not Violet's home.
All right. Then they went back to work for the Hendrickson brothers again.
Yes, and have been ever since.
And who else was working in the family at that time? Who else was working?
Well,
the three
The three
original
brothers, and each brother had one son apiece. They had daughters, but they only had one son apiece.
That was a nice arrangement.
Arthur had Milton, Frank had Frank Jr., and my father had myself. So that was...
So you all moved into the business then? Was it any time when the whole six of you were working together?
Oh, yeah.
Quite a while,
Yeah.
huh?
Well, they turned the brothers turned the business over to Milton, Frank, and myself. I think it was in 1953.
I see.
So we more or less have been running it ever
Running ever
since. Well,
since.
I can't say that. Frank Sr. and his son Frank Jr., the business bought out their share, and I think it was 71 or 2, 71 I believe. I know it was shortly after my father died, which was January of 69. And my mother passed away in October of 71.
So then there were only two of the original brothers, and or even of the next generation, only two. Now, what about your children?
Well, Sally, as you know, probably you know, married a West Point graduate. She has 6 children and is expecting her 7th sometime in June, I believe. The twins, John and Mary, they're both married. John married a girl from Valley Stream, Loretta Piculo, and Mary married, and they have no children. Mary married Anthony John Shakespeare, who was English heritage and was born over there. He's now a naturalized citizen. They have 3 children. And the youngster, Thomas Jeffrey, he's married. A girl he went to the University of Denver and met this girl out there, and they married. They have one daughter, Julia.
And do either of these your sons work in
Yes,
the business?
yes.
Both of them?
Both of them do. And also Mary's husband, Mr. Shakespeare, works
Oh,
for
I
us
see.
also.
So the whole next generation is in there.
Yeah,
Huh?
and Sally's husband works after he retired from the Army in '86, and he went to work for General Electric up in Pittsfield, Massachusetts.
Now, how about Arthur's family? His son, did he have any sons?
He had one son, Milton, who had no children.
Oh, he had no children. So it's really only, in that generation, it's only your children that are involved. Do they live in Valley Stream?
My children?
Yeah.
The two, no, John does. John and Loretta live over on Carpenter Street. Tom and Terry live on Park Avenue in Malvern. Mary and Tony live out in Ronkonkoma. And as I said, Sally and Hank live up in Pittsfield, Mass. Or Dalton, actually, just outside of Pittsfield, Mass. So,
Now, when your children were growing up, they attend the Valley Stream schools?
Oh, yes.
And how about their vacation times, their summer times?
Well, most of the time, we spent some time at Emily's sister and her husband had some property out in Fort Salonga on the north shore of the island, and we used to go out there and spend our summers pretty much, well, until right now. Emily and I still spend our summers out there.
Uh-huh.
And
All right, now you say this property is right on the water.
yes,
So you have boats and things? or-
well, we had a little dinghy at first, and then my brother-in-law out there got a little Boston whaler, outboard motor on it. I got one the following year, I think. And we used to go fishing, water skiing, most things out there. And we really enjoyed it. It's interesting. The cottage that we stay in is a pre-1919 prefabricated Sears Roebuck cottage, and it's quite a piece of work.
Prefabricated in 1919?
Previous to 19. Nobody knows exactly when, but whenever they started making them.
That's amazing.
My
I didn't
brother.
know they had them that far back.
Well, I didn't either, but my brother-in-law's father and his brothers, I guess, maybe some of his uncles even, or put it up. It has numbered, pre-numbered, you know. It's terrific, and it's still standing. The north end of it fell in Long Island Sound one summer in April of 1961, and Mr. Longotham had it moved back and built a new north wall on it, new fireplace, everything, new chimney.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of erosion
Oh,
along
yes.
the cliffs there. Is
Yeah.
it still bad?
Oh yes, well,
Can't
it's
stop it.
well, a lot of it's been bulkheaded,
Oh,
as
yeah.
it has been there. But eventually, Mother Nature's going to take over again, as she always does.
Yes, that's true. I know there was water skiing. My daughter was invited a couple of times out
Oh yeah,
there, and
we
she
had a lot of fun out there.
enjoyed that. Well, I think we've pretty well covered it,
No,
sort of capsule form.
Well, I hope I've been helpful. There's nothing, as I say, there's nothing
Well,
spectacular.
Oh, no, well, this is
At
well, we're not looking for that. We're just
Oh,
looking
well.
for life in Valley Stream.
This is it.
All right, thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.